Okay, we're connected. Be starting in less than a minute. Everything seems to be in order. Okay, we'll start. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. So last week I give a introduction to the idea of the three characteristics, the tilakkhana, that are common to all conditioned objects, all sankharas, so everything in samsara. And I'm going to focus for the next 3 weeks on the individual characteristics. So talking about dukkha today, dukkha, of course, is central, front and center in the Buddhist teachings, because the Four Noble Truths, which is the quintessence of Buddhism, all centers around the concept of dukkha. There's the truth of dukkha, the truth of the origin of dukkha, truth of the ending of dukkha, and the truth of the path leading to the end of dukkha. So it's not only one of the three characteristics, it's a critical concept in understanding the Buddhist teachings. It's been traditionally translated as suffering. There's a number of problems with this translation, although it works in some contexts, and it doesn't work badly in the context of the Four Noble Truths, for example, although it's still not ideal. The first problem is that since every conditioned thing is dukkha, if we say that everything is suffering, that first of all, it's patently, obviously false. And secondly, it gives people an unfairly pessimistic view of Buddhism. There certainly is a reality of suffering in the world, but of Buddhism. There certainly is a reality of suffering in the world, but not every mind moment is experienced as suffering. There is pleasure. There are painful and pleasurable objects, and there are many neutral objects that are neither pleasant nor painful. I believe that if it were possible for the average person, most of the time, if you could keep a running total of your mind moments throughout the day, over time you could find and classified them as pleasurable, painful, or neutral. I think you'd find the overwhelming majority would be just boring old neutral, not moving the mind towards pleasure or pain. So, this is one reason why suffering is not a perfect translation. The other reason is that translating dukkha as suffering puts emphasis on the subjective aspect. When we say all conditioned objects are dukkha, every object that arises to consciousness and everything that exists in the universe is dukkha, it's senseless to say that a rock or a bowl of water suffers, but it's still dukkha. Dukkha this has an important practical aspect to it, a meditational aspect, because people who don't notice this aspect, they can fall into the error of thinking that dukkha is entirely subjective. It's something we impose on the objects of consciousness with our own bias, and it's kind of a defilement. But it's not that. It's the objects themselves are inherently dukkha. You know? There have been other suggestions for translating dukkha. Unsatisfactory or unsatisfactoriness is one that is sometimes used. And that is somewhat better, but it still puts too much emphasis on the subjective side. But it does point out one important quality of dukkha from the subjective side, and that is that the fact that the objects, and I'll return to this point because it's an important one, but the fact that the objects are dukkha is what keeps the mind enslaved in the process of samsara. Because if the objects were not dukkha, then if they were satisfying, then the mind would be able to rest. But because the objects are unsatisfying to the mind is unsatisfied, it then craves the next object. And this keeps the process going. Tanisaro had come up with an interesting translation. He calls it he calls dukkha stress, and I think there's something to that if you understand what he means by it. Unfortunately, most people seeing him talk about stress assume he means stress in the psychological sense, like you're stressed out from overwork or whatever. But that's not what he means, because he explains it someplace. I think in a footnote, actually, in one of his writings, he explained that he means stress not in the psychological sense, but in the engineering sense, like the stress between two beams in a bridge bearing on each other. And this is actually quite good if you understand it in that sense, the stress in the engineering sense, because it is one of the aspects of dukkha from the objective side is that objects are incomplete and bear on each other. They wear on each other. So I think as a summary of this problem of translation, I think we can say that dukkha is really untranslatable. There's no single English word that really encapsulates the meaning of dukkha properly. It's one of those words that we just have to learn the deep meaning of it on its own and not rely on the limitations of imperfect translation, which is one of the real problems, I think, with people understanding that the Dhamma is relying on imperfect translations. And it's not a fault of the translators. It's an inherent fault of of language, that no two languages are completely isomorphic. You can't really do a perfect translation. You can only render the meaning as close as possible to the target language. So let's look a little deeper into what we're talking about with dukkha. In Visuddhimagga, there's a discussion of the etymology or the root of the meaning of dukkha, from a linguistic point of view. And this is not real linguistic science. This is a kind of pedagogical technique used by Buddhaghosa often, that he would explain a word by making up etymologies for it, and they really not linguistically sound, but he's trying to come at the meaning from different directions. And he does a number of these for dukkha. And one that is is quite cogent and has been picked up by a lot of commentators is meaning something like out of round. And he gives the example of a wagon wheel where the axle hole in the middle has been cut poorly, and it's distorted. It's not a proper circle. So that when you ride in the wagon, it's always bumping and jarring. This was the inspiration for the thumbnail I put up of the busted bicycle. The real etymology of dukkha probably means something like hard to take, hard to bear. And pointing to the objective nature of dukkha, the aspect that is inherent in the objects themselves, it has implications of incompleteness, imperfection, provisional nature, that dependent nature. It ties in with the idea of dependent origination, that nothing exists from its own side. Everything is a reflection of other things, and an imperfect reflection. The reality of samsara is that everything is kind of shoddy workmanship. Things are coming into existence in a sense as broken bits. When we talk about the concept of sunyata, and I may get back to this, circle back to it when we talking about anatta, the idea of sunyata or voidness could be one aspect of that to understand is that because things are empty, the ultimate state is sunyata, is voidness or emptiness. And that emptiness is, in some sense, perfect because nothing is manifest. And because nothing is manifest, it has infinite potentiality. Because nothing has manifested, anything can manifest, you see. But as soon as something comes into existence, as soon as there's some existent form in the universe, then it has lost that infinite potential. It's lost that perfection. It's become just a broken bit, a shard of reality. And this is the nature of things as they are in samsara. And this is dukkha in its essence. And then from the subjective side, when the mind takes an object, which we're doing continually at a very rapid pace, this is what mind does. Consciousness takes an object. Because the objects are imperfect, because they're provisional, incomplete, the mind cannot be satisfied. It cannot be at rest. The object does not serve to complete or satisfy the mind. So the mind is still left wanting, and desire is not satiated. It's still active. So the mind then seeks out the next object. It's like being on a merry-go-round and reaching out for the prize hanging above, kind of shiny things. Nothing ever is good enough. The mind can never rest or be satisfied. This is the suffering that's caused. So this is the suffering aspect at the deepest level. This the unsatisfied nature of the mind. Now, as we mentioned previously, the mind objects have, in the relationship to Vedana or feeling, they're either pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. And In the commentaries, they distinguish between three modes of dukkha that relate to the three feelings. If it's a painful object, then the dukkha that experienced is called dukkha dukkhata, which means something like dukkha as such, or dukkha per se. This is the obvious kind of dukkha. There's no difficulty in understanding it. You get poked in the eye with a sharp stick, then that's dukkha, that's suffering. And no one really needs to have that too much explained. With pleasant objects, the dukkha is a dukkha viparinama, the dukkha of changeableness. And this ties in with the idea of anicca, which we're going to do next week. The impermanence, because part of the unsatisfying nature of objects is that they don't last, that there might be a very delightful, delicious feeling, that first lick of an ice cream cone, but it soon fades. There's no permanent final satisfaction to be had through conditioned objects. There's a saying in one of the Tibetan teachings I looked at that says that if there were anywhere in existence, if there were one perfect object, one sankhara that was completely perfect and satisfying, then the universe would have ceased to exist long ago, because all consciousness would eventually find that object and cease to move. Then there's the neutral mind moments. Then that they are related to dukkha sankhata, or dukkha as a state, or the dukkha of nature. And that dukkha is the one that applies to all objects. But for a neutral object, it's the only one that applies, because there's no suffering and there's no pleasure, so there's no loss of pleasure, there's no viparinama. But the object experienced neutrally is still inherently in itself, objectively, dukkha. As I mentioned in the first talk in this series, any one of the three characteristics, if it's penetrated in depth, becomes a gateway to liberation, that you can gain an understanding and break through and realize nirvana by a complete penetration of any one of the three. And for someone who attains awakening through the gateway of dukkha, this is called being a body witness. And the reason for this is because dukkha as suffering, the suffering aspect of dukkha, is very evident in the body. It's coarse and easy to observe in the body. Each of the three characteristics also has its own way of hiding, of masking, so that we don't ordinarily perceive it unless we're looking at things keenly, with the eye of vipassana. We don't normally perceive dukkha all the time. And the way that dukkha hides itself is called change of postures. And this again relates to the body. And this could be understood at the level of the body, or it could be understood metaphorically at the level of the mind, that there's a fidgeting of the body and there's fidgeting of the mind. There's a story about a Burmese laywoman who was a meditation teacher, and one of her techniques was, when a student came to see her, she would tell them to sit in a comfy chair, make themselves comfortable. And she'd say, like, take your time, make sure you're really settled and really comfortable. And then she, after a couple of minutes, she'd ask them, "Are you completely at ease? Are you completely comfortable?" And they'd say, "Yes, yes, I'm really comfortable. It's a nice chair." And then she'd say, "Okay, now don't move a muscle." Then she'd start talking, and inevitably, within less than 5 minutes, they'd have to move. They'd fidget, and they'd like recross their legs or put their weight on the other elbow or whatever. And she would then jump on them and say, "What are you doing? I told you not to move." "Well, I was uncomfortable." "Well, you told me you were comfortable, perfectly comfortable." And she would use that as a springboard to talk about the dukkha of inherent in the body, and how we mask it by fidgeting, by moving, which then it doesn't eliminate. When we change postures, we don't eliminate the dukkha, but we get a new constellation of dukkha that isn't so evident at first, and then we feel at ease. But then within a few minutes, the inherent dukkha of the body becomes evident again, and then we want to move. I think this is one of the, or probably the main reason why beginning meditators often experience a lot of pain in the body. They're just not used to sitting still, and escaping from the dukkha by fidgeting. And when they close off that method of escape, then the dukkha becomes more and more evident in this experience, this excruciating pain in the body. But one gets beyond that, of course, with the development of meditation. And it's not so much even that the body becomes at ease, but that although that does happen, you become more at ease with sitting still physically, but the mind begins to mature so that when dukkha is evident in the body, it just recognizes it. It doesn't react to it. With physical pain, there's two levels to any physical pain. One is the real physical pain, whether it's from illness or injury. You feel some damage to the body. It's experienced painfully. And the other one is the mental level, which is actually entirely self-imposed and optional. It's the kind of internal whinging and moaning about, oh, why do I hurt? This is so bad, and that can be overcome. You don't have to succumb to that. So in our practice, with dealing with dukkha, we should first of all recognize it, understand it, be aware of it, and recognize it's just a painful sensation. It's not anything beyond that. And then at a deeper level, to try and see that dukkha sankhata, the inherent dukkha of all objects, that even when they're not painful, when they're just neutral or even pleasurable, they're still imperfect. There's still a brokenness about everything that arises to the mind. And if we're seeking some perfection and ultimate contentment and satisfaction within the samsaric objects, we'll never find it, and it becomes a hopeless quest. We'll always be disappointed. But if we recognize dukkha for what it is, as a characteristic that arises from ultimately from our craving, the subjective aspect arises from our craving, then we can overcome it. Now that's the second noble truth. Dukkha arises from tanha, from craving. And at the level of mind moments, at the sort of nuts and bolts level, what's happening is that the craving is for an object. The mind takes the object and becomes unsatisfied. This object is not what I wanted. It's not perfect. And the mind is then immediately grasping out for the next object, which again disappoints. And this is the engine. This is the interplay between first and second noble truth. which is expanded. The explanation is expanded in the dependent origination to take in all the intermediate phases. But this is the engine that drives samsaric existence. This is the ultimate addiction. This is the habit of the mind that's the mind has not broken from since beginningless time. And the only way to break from it is to make it fully conscious. And when the mind is fully conscious, this is seeing things in their own nature as they actually are, yata bhuta nanadasana, then the enchantment with the process goes away. This is a nibbida, then the passion fades, this viraga, and then enlightenment can occur. Nibbana occurs when we just stop doing samsara. So I'll stop there and see what we got on the chat for questions. I'll try to answer a few questions. First question, can dukkha be the feeling the mind gets less or more when it suffers in different difficulties, problems, calamities, unsatisfaction, etc.? Yes, that's the aspect of dukkha that we call dukkha dukkhata. That's obvious dukkha as suffering per se. Do arahants enjoy ice cream? Arahants still have pleasurable sensation. There's a story, I'll recount this story that I heard from one of our senior monks who heard it from Ajahn Chah. It's a story about the Buddha and Ananda, but it's not a canonical story, and we're not sure if Ajahn Chah just made it up or whether it's a traditional Thai story or what the source actually is, but it's a good story. But just so you know, it's not from the actual suttas or commentaries. It seems that Buddha and Ananda were invited to a meal offering at a rich person's house, some lord, and the food was exquisite, delicious, copious amounts of very delightful food. And Ananda, who always had a weakness with sensuality, he was becoming overwhelmed with the food. He's trying to remain mindful, but he was becoming confused and bewildered by all the pleasurable sensation of the aromas and the tastes. And he looked at the Buddha, and the Buddha was just calmly eating spoonful after spoonful without any visible reaction. And Ananda said to the Buddha, Lord, it must be that the Tathagata experiences all flavors the same. And the Buddha said, say not so, Ananda, say not so. I shall show you how the Tathagata experiences food. And he took a clump of half-chewed rice and curry from his mouth, and he said, eat this, Ananda. And Ananda put it in his mouth, and he almost passed out and swooned from the intensity of the flavors. They were like 1,000 times more delightful and wonderful than they had been. And the Buddha said, so it is, Ananda. So this is how the Tathagata experiences food, but his mind is not disturbed thereby. So yes, I think that arahants probably do enjoy ice cream, but they would have no attachment to it. Let's see, I lost my place in the chat here. Okay, here it is. Is jhana considered samsaric object? Yes, jhana is still a samsaric object. It's very highly refined. It's beyond the level of sense experience. It's at the next level higher of consciousness. This transcended sensuality altogether, but it's still conditioned. It's still within samsara. Why is it that the objects themselves and not the fault of the mind attaching to the object? Well, that's just the nature of reality. That's that the objects themselves are, by being existent, by being manifest, they are imperfect and they have a limited potentiality. Whereas if they not manifest in the state of sunyata or avoidance, there's still a limitless potentiality because nothing has been manifested. So everything is possible. But once they manifest, that's that. Then they're now just a broken bit and dependent and related and impermanent and all the rest of it. Which gateway of enlightenment did the Buddha achieve enlightenment through? I don't think that's clear. I don't think it's. I've never seen that that clearly defined as to which gateway he went through. There are two separate accounts of his enlightenment, and one of them puts emphasis on the dependent origination, and the other puts the emphasis on the four supreme knowledges, or the three supreme knowledges, which is the knowledge of his own past lives, the knowledge of karma, and the knowledge of the ending of defilements. I haven't seen an account that talks about gateway. Last week, the stream cut off when you were answering what is cessation without liberation in the Sarvastivada tradition. Yeah, it's probably good that it cut off because I don't really have a good answer for that. I'm not well enough educated in the niceties of the Sarvastivada system to really give a proper answer to that. I speculated that it might refer to the arupa jhanas, but I wouldn't stand on that. Can you talk about the meaning of nibbida? Yeah, nibbida is another word that is impossible to adequately translate. Some of the older translations call it something like revulsion or disgust, which is way too negative. I kind of like, as a closest possible translation, I like disenchantment, although that's a little bit too magical sounding. But nibbida is that attitude of mind when you have broken the spell of samsara, that you've seen through it, and you no longer feel fascinated or desirous of it. So this is the disenchantment aspect. It's like you've before you realize and reach the stage of nibbida, you're enchanted by the process. You're bewildered by it. And that's from two ends. There's the fascination with the wonderful, colorful aspects of samsara, and there's fear and terror of the horrible, threatening, dangerous aspects. And nibbida is just like losing interest in all of that. It's just, oh yeah, just more of the same. Next one. Some monks teach about taking refuge in pure awareness, and they said that pure awareness is the only refuge. Is that legit? I think there's a way you could look at it like that. Certainly, that sounds a lot like the Thai forest tradition coming from Ajahn Mun, resting in the chitta, just not identifying with the objects, but centering your consciousness in the pure knowing. That is a very liberating attitude of mind. In any given moment, prior to the realization of nibbana, which is a whole other category, we transcend all duality at that point. But prior to nibbana, the mind is always caught up in the duality of subject and object, the knowing and the known. And we get bewildered and confused, and we suffer when we identify with the objects, with the known, the objective side of consciousness. Now, whereas the chitta has just this pure, unalloyed quality of just experiencing, just knowing. So it can neither be purified nor defiled. It's not affected by anything. It just is. It just does that one simple thing of just knowing. So if we center ourselves in that, then first of all, everything is clear, and we're leading towards freedom. Next one. According to Tibetan understanding, why hasn't all consciousness found nibbana and ceased to move? Well, nibbana is different. It's outside of the samsaric game altogether. What this saying was meaning, as I understand it, is that the samsaric process of taking an object, being unsatisfied, and taking another object only continues because the objects are dukkha, because they're unsatisfying. If an object were fully satisfying, then the consciousness, it wouldn't enter the unconditioned. It would just stop moving. It would just rest on that conditioned point that's perfect, which doesn't exist. Next, if desire is the cause of dukkha, and dukkha is inherent in samsara, is desire the source of the creation of samsara? You can put it that way. In the Buddhist cosmological vision, there is no moment of creation. That the samsara is without beginning. At least this has been the tradition. The Buddha himself refused to speculate about the origin of things, but the tradition always later, beginning with Buddhaghosa, probably before him, said, but Buddhaghosa said explicitly that samsara is one thing that has no beginning point. So rather than say it's the source of creation, you could say it's the engine that keeps it going, that drives it, and has done since beginningless time. Kafka said, "Do not listen, only wait. Do not wait. Do not even wait. Be wholly still and alone. The world will present itself to you for its unmasking. I can do no other." It sounds like a kind of vipassana. Yes, I hadn't seen that quote before. That's quite good. I like that. There's also a similar quote that I heard was Mother Teresa. She was asked, "How do you pray?" They asked her, "What do you say to God when you pray?" And she says, "I don't say anything. I just listen." "And what does God say to you?" "No, he doesn't say anything either. He just listens." Are the Cenobites from Hellraiser like body witnesses? I don't know. I don't know that reference. I don't know what Hellraiser is. I would assume it's a movie or a TV series. I don't know. So I can't answer that. Hard times make strong men. Strong men make easy times. Easy times make weak men. And weak men make hard times. Okay. Yeah, that one I've heard of. I seems to make sense in a historical point of view. You said we owe thanks to parents for bringing us to existence, but just as a tiny amount of poop is foul-smelling, it's same for even a tiny amount of existence. Bawa. Thoughts? Yeah, you're mixing up like two levels of discourse. That when he's talking about our obligation to our parents, he's talking on the level of it's a mundane teaching to do with morality in the world. And when he talks about the inherent foulness of bhava, then he's talking on a more a deeper, more metaphysical level. So you often have to be careful that don't mix up the levels. How does one stop doing samsara? Well, you have to. It's not easy. It's not. Although it is ultimately simple. That's what makes it so difficult. You first have to make the process completely conscious, and when it's completely conscious, then the spell, the illusion, goes away, and it doesn't stop right away, because it's like if you're driving in your car and you take your foot off the gas, but you don't put on the brakes, you even put it in neutral, say, and so the car won't stop. It'll just keep rolling on until it runs out of energy, right? It's the flywheel keep turning. That's the nature of samsara. When we're not feeding it any longer, and when we reach that point of nibbida and viraga, we're not feeding the process. It still has to run down, and that may take a little while. So that we can't really do anything more. Can you please do more talks on Sutta Nipata in the future? Yeah, that's a good suggestion. I may do that. It's a good text to comment on. If someone won't eat meat because of what animals go through, after a while they become arahant, would they not care at that point if they eat animals or not? Well, an arahant would naturally follow the practice as in the Vinaya of just being indiscriminate as to what they eat. Just whatever they're given, they would eat. So they wouldn't make particular demands on people to feed them vegetarian diet. If people gave them meat, they would eat it. What are your thoughts on some of the alien life forms being devas? Specifically the ones that manifest like bright lights. How does all this fit into the Buddhist cosmology? Well, devas, when they are perceived, they're perceived by someone who has some vision, but not perfect vision of the Dibachakra. They would be perceived as bright lights before they take form. So that might tie in. I don't know. That's a question that's kind of interesting to speculate on. We do have, in the Indian text, particularly in the pre-Buddhist text, but also in the Buddhist text as well, they talk about the devas living in vimanas that fly through the air. And there are a number of stories in the Jatakas about people going, traveling in vimanas from the earth to Tawatingsa heaven. So, yeah, I mean, it's one possible interpretation. Is it the correct approach to dukkha, rejection or acceptance of the element of suffering? I'm finding that struggling against suffering sometimes seems to make it worse. Yes. Yeah, that's the whole mental aspect of suffering I alluded to. Like when you have the obvious physical pain in the body, that's a level of dukkha that you have to. You should be able to learn. Well, let's say the objective is to learn to just be with it. But then there's a mental level on top of that with proper practice you can eliminate altogether. And there is that paradox of struggling against pain and suffering. It increases the pain and suffering. No, that's not to say that there's something objective we can do to eliminate the pain. Like if let's say you step on a sharp object and punctures your foot. You don't just have to live with that. You can pull it out and do first aid on it. But the pain that remains, you have to be with. You can't really escape from it. The Buddha describes pain as two arrow, physical and mental. Yes. Does an arahant find physical pain unpleasant, or the equanimity is to it? Well, they would experience it as, they would recognize it as a painful sensation, but they wouldn't have that mental suffering. And this is explicit in the story of the Buddha when he Devadatta tried to kill him by throwing a rock at him, and the rock ended up just cutting his foot. So he was injured in his foot, and he suffered pain from that. But they said he had no mental suffering attached to it, but he would recognize this as painful sensation. Okay. Okay, I think I'll wind it down now. Let's see if there's one or two more I'll deal with. What about the dukkha experience in meditation? I think no joy, no gain in meditation, but is it possible also no pain, no gain? No, that's not, it's not that no pain, no gain. I don't think that really applies to meditation. But with a little bit of a twist, maybe you could say, if the pain arises, then you need to be with it, not end the meditation and try and escape from it. You have to learn to see it and know it and get past it. But I don't think it has in itself. I don't think there isn't really any spiritual benefit in suffering. So any deliberate increasing your own suffering is not skillful. Mental dukkha arises when one acknowledges being trapped in samsaric existence, yet vibhava tanha is unskillful. Is there some form of chanda for non-existence that is skillful but not vibhava tanha? Okay, I think I'll take this one as the last question for today. The questioner is asking about the difference between acknowledging the suffering from samsaric existence without falling into the desire for non-existence. And then you say, is there some form of chanda for non-existence that is skillful? No, because we shouldn't. There's a pair, bhava tanha, vibhava tanha, and both are defilements. Both are to be gotten beyond. So we shouldn't be desiring non-existence either. What nibbana is beyond existence and non-existence. It's out of that game altogether. So the desiring for non-existence in any form is also unskillful and non-productive. Okay, I think I'll stop there, and thank you for attending, and we'll meet again next week.